Jen, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited for our conversation. And you are an artist who has had a very interesting career. And just before we got started, you shared that as a teenager, you worked with your aunt on interiors and yachts. And I want to hear about that. You have a background in theatrical design. You now work in primarily watercolors, correct? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
And so you do your work there, and then you also do commissions. So you are just an artist through and through. So can you talk a little bit about how you got to this point and your career, not only in terms of interior design, but also the theatrical design?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have had a very interesting journey
Yeah.
to get to where I am today,
Yeah.
which included at points being like, no, and like completely walking away for the creative stuff. But
Yeah.
it's just part of my destiny. It just keeps coming back around. And now I fully embrace it with like full open heart and mind and soul.
That's-
But I've always drawn and painted ever since I was a child. It was one of my most favorite things. You talk about favorite toys as a kid. My favorite were honestly my art supplies.
mhm.
Whatever I could get my hands on, craft supplies, art supplies. I loved all of my paint sets. I loved Legos because I loved creating
Oh,
things
yeah.
like just using my imagination. So it was always been part of my life. And when I was in high school, I was very fortunate to go to a school that fostered art if
hmm
you wanted to.
hmm
So I feel very, very grateful for that because when I was in high school, I had a little bit of art in grade school, but it was one of those, oh, once a week sort of things, once every 2 weeks. It wasn't valued as much
Yeah.
as when I went to high school. And I chose the art path over another elective that you could have
Mhm.
taken. And it's really where my love bloomed and blossomed even more. And I got exposed to many different mediums and ways of working. And it was in high school that I fell in love with watercolors.
Mm.
And my senior year of high school, I was in a advanced drawing and painting class. And in one of the sections that we were doing, we learned how to professionally watercolor. And my teacher was an incredible, incredible, incredible watercolorist.
Mm.
And the second painting I did, which was a choose your own adventure, I put pigment down to water and it was like, boom, instant love affair. Like magic appeared before my eyes. And I was like, this is my baby and I love this so much. And like, this is my favorite medium ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've done other ones too, but like, that's where the love began for watercolors.
Yeah.
And it just has grown since.
Yeah. What is it about watercolor do you think you're so attracted to?
It's so interesting because it can be a very difficult medium.
It seems like it. It seems like there's not a ton of control. I mean, as much
Yeah,
as maybe some other mediums.
there can be a lot of control, and I do how to know how to use it in a very controlled manner. I
hmm
think my favorite part of it is that lack of control. And
hmm
really what I mean by that is, and I didn't really understand this back then. This was like 25 years ago when that first instant happened where I put the brush and pigment into water that I had laid down on the paper and it just went psh, and it was
Yeah.
just this magic. And for me, I realized as I got older and like did some more work and was really playing with the medium, what really I was drawn to was the flow, the
hmm
fluidity, the giving up of control. And really, I look at it as when I'm painting, being in harmony with the medium,
hmm
where sometimes the watercolor leads and sometimes I lead, and we are dance partners to make something happen. Like that's
hmm
the best way I can explain it. And there's just something so beautiful about that. And as I've also gotten older and done a lot more personal growth work and inner work, I also see how watercolor is a beautiful invitation to gain insights about yourself. So
hmm
if you're a perfectionist and you want to like let go of some of that, like this is the perfect medium to like to work in because you got to let go at
Yeah.
some point. And you also have to accept, I was sharing this with somebody the other day who asked me a question and she said, "But what happens if you make a mistake?" And My answer was this. I said, sometimes you can correct the mistake in watercolor. It's not as easy. Acrylic you can paint over, right? Some other things you can get away with if you make a big, in quotes, mistake,
Right.
you can course correct. You may or may not be able to do that in watercolor. And I said, I don't really worry about that anymore. I trust
Hmm.
the process. And if I make a huge mistake and I can't correct it, I accept that it's one that's for the trash pile and it's just
Yeah.
part of the process. And I think that's the magic of watercolors for me too. It is not only the magic and the beauty that comes from creating and being the creative process, but over the years, it's allowed me to gain so many lessons and insights for both my
Yeah.
personal and business life.
Yeah. And a lot of your work seems to be inspired by nature,
Mhm.
water, the cosmos, which with the flow of things and as you were talking about it, seems to lend itself so beautifully to watercolor. Have you always been drawn to those uh, themes, or is that something that's evolved over time?
I think I've always been drawn to them, although when you're in school and stuff, you're locked into what assignments are.
Hmm.
So as I evolved later on in time as a watercolorist, and originally when I started painting again years ago, after having taken a break, because I was in
Hmm.
that creative career,
Hmm.
which I'm sure
Hmm.
we'll get to,
Yeah.
I had no intention of showing, I had no intention of selling, I had no intention of doing any of that. It was really supposed to be just for me, just for
Hmm.
my own joy and calm and peace and love and creative expression. And that's when the nature element really, really came in. I've always been drawn to the water as a
Hmm.
child, even though I did not live quite near the water where I grew up. We had family that lived near the water, actually, in
Hmm.
fact, very close to where I live now in Connecticut. So I am surrounded by nature here in Connecticut. There are
Yeah.
so many trees and forests and parks, and I live on quite near the coast, so I'm not
Hmm.
in inner, so I'm always near the water.
Yeah.
So it is a heavy, heavy influence to me. And I love it because to me, nature gives us everything. It can be grounding, it is calming, it allows us to decompress. I feel like when I paint inspired by the ocean, it's because the water and the ocean is representative of the entire range and breadth of emotions that we can feel as humans.
Hmm.
It gives us permission to breathe when we have that stillness of the water, or just enjoy a moment when it's softly coming up on the shore. It also gives us permission to express anger and roar like the waves when there's a
Yeah.
storm. It is truly that huge range that I am drawn and attracted to and inspired to bring into our houses
Yeah.
and onto the page.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And when you were developing, especially in high school, were there certain artists that you were particularly drawn to at that time?
Oh gosh, a whole entire range. And the interesting thing is, if you're not familiar with them and you look them up, you'll see they're stylistically, they're not the same.
Yeah.
But one of my favorites was, and still is, these are some
Uh-huh.
of my favorites still, Georgia O'Keeffe.
Hmm.
I was always drawn to her bold use of color,
Hmm.
and of course, a female artist,
Yeah.
just who was quite amazing for her time and all of what she accomplished and what she did. But I just loved the way that she viewed nature, whether it
Hmm.
was flowers or the desert or whatever she was working on. I absolutely adored that. Very drawn to it, very inspired by it. Huge fan of Monet. I know most people know Monet and water lilies. I was always drawn to the water lilies specifically, even from a young age. And
Hmm.
as I got older and experienced a lot more life, also became a meditator and doing other
Hmm.
things and tapping more into my own creative flow, I had a very different experience with the water lilies, a much deeper, deeper viewpoint when I would look at them. And I could honestly spend an entire day just looking at that collection of paintings, getting
Interesting.
completely lost in the colors and the mark makings.
Hmm.
But then I also am a fan of Mondrian, which is completely linear and
Totally different.
completely different, right? So for me, it's about the different feelings. And I love Jackson Pollock because that's
Yeah.
just pure emotion that's
Yeah.
just thrown onto the canvas in like such a really amazing way. And I know that's a controversial one. People either kind of love or hate Pollock,
Yeah.
or maybe some in between, but I love the emotion that's in
Hmm.
there and that's being brought upon the page. So I just have a love for people's process
Hmm.
as well as just different elements that I'm drawn to. And
Drawn to.
honestly, some of it's my own interpretation. I'm not necessarily knowing what these artists are thinking, even artists that are living now who we see all over the internet. So I have a philosophy on this, and
Hmm.
this is what I love and I encourage people to do. Whether you're looking at my work or you're looking at somebody else's work, whether it's on the internet or you go to a museum, I love to just have an experience with the work
Hmm.
because our own stories, our own experiences, our cultures, our beliefs, everything, the emotions that we have experienced influence the way that we perceive things. And it can be even different on one day to another, right?
Hmm.
Like you can look at something one day and have this experience, and then a week later, you've experienced something in life, and you can look at a painting and you can have a completely different experience that you
Yeah.
had a week prior. So I always love to invite people to have that experience, to just go to what you gravitate towards and notice what emotions are coming up for you. Does it evoke a memory? Are you gaining an insight from looking at this piece of artwork, right? It could be so many different things. And I
Yeah.
think that's part of the power of art is that we can have these experiences. And then if you want to go look at what is influence things, that's cool too. Like I'll do
Yeah.
that sometimes and sometimes I don't. It depends. And I think that's a really amazing thing about art.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying, and I played music at a very high level. I almost made it my career, and I played trumpet, and I remember my trumpet instructor. We were talking about opera once, and I said, I like opera, but I don't get it. Like I don't understand what I'm watching. I don't understand what I'm listening to. And he was like, oh yeah, you don't have to. Just
Hmm.
enjoy it. And it was like someone opened a window and light flooded in. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, you can just enjoy it. And that's how I
Hmm.
feel. My sister's an artist, and that's how I feel about art. I'm like, I'm sure she sees it differently, very differently than me, but not trying to figure out why I like this artist or
Hmm.
why I like this particular piece or why I like this style. It's so freeing. Like, I love Picasso.
Hmm.
I know that he's controversial, but I do love Picasso. I can't tell you why. I just do. Guernica is one of my favorite pieces. I had the pleasure of being able to see it in person. I can't explain to you why. There's just an emotional connection there, as well as Kehinde Wiley, who's like about as opposite as you can get. I mean, I sat and I saw a Keith Haring and a Kehinde Wiley, and both of them I cried over. I was just like, it's just when you just allow yourself to open up to it.
Hmm.
And it is fun to see the context behind it and the understanding, but I would love to know more about, especially with the lilies, the meditative portion of it. And it's also interesting how art can grow with you. So, can you speak to that a little bit about how that relationship, particularly with Monet, has grown over the years and maybe what you think that's about?
Yeah, sure. I think it's about this really ties into what you were talking about music. And before I go
Hmm.
into that, because I think this
Yeah.
is going to add to why I'm saying this.
Yeah.
When I was in college, I my roommates happened to all be opera singers,
Mm,
and they were at school to study opera. I was there to study theatrical scenery design, and I would go to their performances.
yeah.
And not necessarily like they put on big full-blown operas, but they would also have to do these solo or collaborated where you would just sing
Sure.
arias,
Yeah.
and they would have to give to the audience like a translated version of what they
Hmm.
were singing. But I noticed I never wanted the translated version. I really just wanted to sit in the experience, hear them take it in, and feel the emotions that they were bringing to the piece of music. I just
Yeah.
really wanted to be in the experience. And because I didn't know what they were saying, I was allowed to fully be in that experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's the experience I was starting to have with the Monets, where I allowed myself to not logically think about things, but to sit in front of and enjoy the work at a very deep level. And as I started to meditate many years ago and it became a practice, what I found is that when I am creating in my studio, that is a form of meditation for me. It's
Yes.
just a different one.
Yes.
And I have also found that you can sit in front of a piece of artwork and allow that artwork to be your meditation. It
Mm.
gives you a focal point. So you can, so this is good news for those of you who have tried to meditate and you're like, oh my gosh, but I can't do that. Yeah, this is why there's different forms for everybody, right? And I do a lot
Right.
of different forms, but I would encourage you to sit in front of a piece of artwork. And I think as I grew older and I have evolved as a person and I have done more deeper inner work and meditated, that is what allowed me to have this very deeper, different experience. So previously, I didn't know why I was drawn to the Monet. I just knew I was drawn to it. But then when I re-experienced it and I got to sit in one of the museums, I'm pretty sure it's the Orangerie in Paris, that has a room of the huge water lilies, and there's four of them. This oval
Hmm.
room was, I believe it was specifically built for these paintings. You can sit in there and just experience, you can walk around, you can sit there. And as I would just sit there or stand in front of it, I got to notice like the depth of colors, the layers of colors. And they're not necessarily what you would see in real life, right? Some of them are, but there was more to it. There was the artist's interpretation and expression that came into that. And I just fell in love even more. And I
Yeah.
was kind of like, oh, is Monet painting energy? Is he painting like light?
Yeah.
Is he painting just the feeling that these flowers make him feel? I don't know, but
Right.
that was the experience I was having
Yeah.
in front of these works after that period of time.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's something you just said. It's like, how did Monet feel about purple? Like, if you said, how do you feel about purple? I wonder what the response would be. Have you seen any of the interactive art exhibits from past painters? I went to one with Van Gogh that was like immersive. Have you experienced one?
I have only seen them online, but I have not gone to them in person yet. I
Do you
may.
have any thoughts on that? Like I went to one in Miami for Van Gogh and it was
Mhm.
cool. I mean, I will say it was cool. And I was like, I wonder what he would think if he would love this and be like, wow, look at how my art is being interpreted and it's being brought alive, or if he would hate it. Do you have any thoughts on?
Ye- I have no idea, but as an artist myself,
Yes.
if I could give somebody an even more experiential feel where they are completely surrounded by the work,
Hmm.
I think I would be totally cool with it. So I think that that's a way to engage with people who, first of all, are art lovers are probably going to go check it out. But somebody who is maybe not an art lover
Yeah.
has an opportunity to experience something in a whole new way. And that may open something up for them and
Hmm.
go get more curious about artwork. I mean, there
Yeah.
is a movie, and I do not remember the name of it, but it is on Van Gogh and it's a very cool. They hand painted, they had artists from all around the world hand paint, and the whole thing was his work, but it was all moving as
Moving.
they were sharing about his life. And I thought that that was such an amazing, cool experience and way to honor the artist. And Van Gogh has these incredible, incredible brushstrokes and the way that he viewed the world, or I'm assuming that's his interpretation of
Right.
how he saw the world, or that's how he wanted to share it on canvas. But his brushstrokes to me are magical and they have so much movement in them.
Yes.
So to bring that movement to life as you're sharing the story,
Yeah.
I think also is a beautiful way to not only honor the artist, but to give people an opportunity to experience something in a very different way.
Yeah. Yeah. It almost to me, and I obviously I don't want to, I won't speak for Vincent or any artist, but it almost feels like remixing of music, like when
Yeah.
samples are taken, and I'm like, how neat that even crossing genres and how it's used to
Mhm.
create this new thing. Two things that you said that I want to touch on. If someone who may feel intimidated by going to a museum, like I will say, I mentioned my sister's an artist, and my mom really tried to help foster that. So we went to museums quite a bit as kids, and I'm so grateful for that. I feel very at home. I look for museums. Like I love going to an art museum. But that's not everyone's experience. And maybe not everybody even connects with art or feels like they don't. How do you recommend people approach an art museum if it's maybe
Mhm.
their first time or they feel a little intimidated? And also in that vein, and this is a much probably bigger conversation, how can we just experience the world through an artist's eye as well?
Oh,
So maybe museum first and
such a good
then artist's eye.
that's such a good question. And
Yeah.
I thought of something else that we have to go back a little bit to our
Great.
other conversation.
Okay.
So let me do that first, and then
Yeah,
we'll go
yeah.
to the museum because these actually do tie in together.
Perfect.
So when you were asking me about this interpretation of the art completely surrounded by you, this reminds me of when I used to be a scenic designer and in the entertainment business.
Yeah.
And we would create and draw drawings, and somebody would build it and all of these things. And what was so fascinating about it is that you give somebody this little small piece of paper that's to scale, and then somebody blows it up really big. And when you walk on the stage, you're like, whoa, like all of a sudden
This
this
is
little tiny piece is this huge, sometimes 20, 30, 40 foot tall
wow.
piece of scenery. And it really creates an environment in the world. That's why you will hear actors talking about when they're on movie sets or things, they're like, oh my gosh, like the costume really put me into the character.
Yeah.
The oh my gosh, the production, I walked on the set and I was like, whoa, like they feel the world, and that helps them to express even more. So I think that that's the cool thing too about those interactive
Yes.
experiences. Like you really do become immersed in the world. And when you're asking about like it's the first time going to a museum, this is going to be easier. It's going to sound easier said than done. Not to be intimidated. I look at it this way. It's your viewpoint and it's your world that you
Hmm.
get to go experience this thing. And if you've never been to a museum before, I would say look ahead of time to see what exhibits they have. I am very
Hmm.
fortunate. I grew up right outside New York City, and now I live in Connecticut, so I'm still close to New York City. One of my favorite museums is the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And
Yeah.
what I love about it is, for those of you that are not familiar with it, they have it's enormous, and they have all of these different sections. So
Hmm.
there's an Egyptian section, and there's like an armory section, and there's
Hmm.
all these different painting sections, and they have special exhibits. And to me, it would be they have a whole furniture wing, like
Yeah.
they have a musical wing, they have all of these things. To me, it would be go to what you are drawn to first. Go to
Hmm.
what interests you and go with an open mind. Like it's okay to not like something. Some
Yeah.
people who, my mom is a great example of this. She likes very more literal things.
Hmm.
Whereas when I paint abstractly, she's kind of like, ah, eh. Like
Yeah.
she just, and I don't take that as offense or anything. It's just because she is more drawn to something like that's behind me that I would create that's more
Sure.
literal, right?
Sure.
Versus something that's just full of all color.
Hmm.
So don't judge yourself for not liking or liking things. We all have personal tastes,
Yes.
and we are allowed to have those personal tastes. And if you're really unsure of how to interpret the art, although I would encourage you to just go have a reaction in front of the different paintings, cool, go buy the headset
Yeah.
that guides you around, or go do a tour. Whatever is going to make you feel the best, I
Hmm.
think is the correct thing to do. So whatever it is for you, I would go and do that
Yeah.
and have
Yeah.
fun. Like, and again, you may find all of a sudden you're so drawn to something, and you, like you had shared earlier, you may not know why.
Yeah.
That's the fun part. I don't always know why I'm drawn to a piece of artwork.
Yeah.
I just know that instantaneously I might have deep emotional connection and I don't need to think about it. It is just a
Yes.
feeling and I am drawn to it. And then there's some other pieces that you may really love because you might just appreciate the the talent and the technique behind them. Like incredible
Yes.
portraiture or even a still life that you're like, whoa, like somebody painted that? Like that's incredible. So just notice what lights you up.
Yeah. It's funny too because just two quick asides. A friend and I were in the this is like sounds so pretentious, but a friend and I were in Madrid. We were at the Prado and just massive, so many pieces there. And we go in and we have the headsets on and it's like 800 paintings of Jesus and Mary in some variation. And at a certain point, I looked at her and I was like, I think I'm good. Like, I think I'm good with crucifixions. I think I'm good with nativity scenes. And she was like, oh, thank God. Like, it was like, we got to go to another level.
Yeah.
But a lot, like you said, allowing yourself to be like, you know what? We're good on this or like move on and for whatever reason. But I had to laugh. I was like, we're good. Let's go see some other stuff.
Yes.
And the other piece about art that I really love, and it's also that emotional piece, and there's something so special about connecting. But I almost like when art repels me or I feel
Sure.
repelled by it or repulsed or scared. I can't remember the artist, but it was at the Hirshhorn and it was mixed media. And I'm walking through this exhibit and I literally got scared. And there
Mm,
was something about it. I almost left and I was like, it's just art. Like, keep going, right? Like,
yeah.
try and understand why you're reacting this way and you're
Yes.
safe. It
Yes.
allows you to experience all of these emotions in a very safe way. And so if I see something and I'm like, ugh, I'm like, it's fun to dig into that a little bit. Like, why does that color or that sound or that whatever is going on, the medium that they use, why am I having that reaction? Most of the time I don't know, but it's just fun to explore that as well.
100%. I absolutely love that you said that. And I feel like my job as an artist, and I'll
Hmm.
just speak for myself, although I'm sure many agree with this, our job is to evoke emotion. And we are humans, so we have the entire range of emotion
Yeah.
that we experience. And some people lean more into that. Some people may lean more into evoking that emotion
Yeah.
that you were feeling of like, oh gosh, why am I repelled by this? Or why does this scare me? Or why does this make me feel agitated? Or why does this feel make me feel anxious?
Yeah.
I tend to swing the other way. Uh, and that's because of what I create and also just I tend to like to lean more into the calm and tranquility because that's always the place
Hmm.
I'm trying to get back to and that's what I want to bring to people, but that's just my choice.
Right.
And right, and there is, like you said, there's other artwork you go, oh whoa, like this, it might make you really think about something or you might uncover something within yourself that you're like, oh, that was interesting.
Yeah.
Wonder
Yeah.
what that was about. And maybe you don't need to know, or maybe if you're somebody who likes to journal like me and
Right.
you want to journal on it and
Yes.
go a little deeper and discover, huh, wonder what that was about.
Yeah.
And all of these are valid ways to experience art, and one's not right and one's not wrong. It's just
Yeah.
experience for you.
I'll probably cut this part out, but it was, and I have to look up the artist, but the room that I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not walking through this. There was an aisle and it was a darkened room, and on either side were robotic arms.
Mm,
Like it didn't look like an arm, but it was a robotic arm and red flags, these huge red flags. And there
mm,
was just an undercurrent of music and just this low, like almost gurgling sound.
mm.
And they were all synchronized, but a little chaotic. And you had to walk through it. And I was like,
Oh,
and the funny thing is, again, I was like, you're safe. Like it's nothing's gonna attack you.
mhm.
You're safe. And when I was thinking about it later, I was like, why did this bother you so much? And the only thing I could think of was as a kid watching Star Wars, I was just so
Ah,
scared of like the Empire. There was something about that like reminded me of it. So yeah, sometimes it's not that deep. I was like, yeah, that felt very like Darth Vader
yeah.
Empire-ish right there. And then as we walk around our everyday lives, like I love nature as well. One of my favorite things to do is just sit and watch
Mhm.
and just in my backyard or in my front yard and just see the light and how it's hitting leaves or how you think nothing is around you. And when you look at the grass, lots of things are around you. But how can we have more of an artist's eye as we approach our day-to-day lives, whether we're at the grocery store or by the beach or wherever we are?
I love this question because I personally believe that nature is the world's greatest artist.
Yeah.
I mean, nature gives us so much, not
Hmm.
only the range of all of the emotions, but all of the colors that are available for us to see in our
Yeah.
world, which is
Yeah.
pretty amazing and really cool. I love that you brought the grocery store into that. I'm going to go with that one first before I go into nature because something immediately popped in. And as soon as you said that, I immediately saw in my head an orange,
Oh,
like
yeah.
just a stack of oranges and bright orange. Remember, like some artists love to paint still lifes, right?
Sure.
So we can be very inspired by all of these things. And what I would say is if you wanted to view the world more from an artist's eye, just start to notice what's around you. Like set the intention that you're going to notice more, right? Because when
Mhm.
we start to have awareness, then we start to recognize more. And you could go with a simple thing of what colors do I notice in this grocery store today? What colors are really speaking to me? And what is really standing out for me? And for some
Mhm.
of you, it might be the colors aren't as interesting to you, but the shapes are very interesting to you.
Mhm.
For some of you, it might be the way that something is displayed on a store shelf, how they set it up with the colors, with the packaging, with how everything plays together. I think nobody's ever asked me this question before. This is such a good question. I've never really thought about it from a store
Yeah.
perspective before. So this is so much fun.
Yeah.
But there is so many possibilities if you're open to looking for them
Hmm.
and willing to experience the world that way.
Yeah. And I think also, and this keeps coming back up, but letting go of the notion of what you think art is,
Mhm.
packaging can be art. And
Absolutely.
so I love that just being open to it. I love setting that intention of noticing more. I think
Yeah.
that we probably all could do that. We're so busy.
Yeah.
Now, so you've had a lot of different experiences in different genres. So,
Yeah.
how do you think they have all interplayed and also influenced what you're doing now?
Oh, yeah. They have all played together, and that's part of, I think, how we
It's fun.
evolve. But as a teenager, as we mentioned in the beginning,
Yeah.
I worked for my aunt, who's an interior designer for yachts. And it was a very interesting job because I did do office work and stuff for her,
Hmm.
but they would have boat shows and people would ask us to come and well ask her I was
Hmm.
just along for the ride to stage it, right, just like you would stage a home so people
Yeah.
could get the idea of what the environment could be if they were to purchase this thing and how would they be living in it. And
Yeah.
that was really a very cool way for me to experience art. And also, I mean, what teenager doesn't want to get paid to go shopping and go
Yeah.
find props and accessories and things? When I went to school to become a theatrical scenery designer. I worked in the entertainment business for over a decade doing various things, all different sorts of things
Mhm.
from theater to corporate stuff. I think that's one of the best backgrounds I could have ever had because I had a lot of the fine arts naturally, and also from high school. I was very well trained in high
Mhm.
school. Obviously, it continued when I was in school. It just had a
Sure.
very different spin on it because that was a different way to be creative. And one of my most favorite things about that, and this is ties into how I work with clients today when they're commissioning me to do work,
Yes.
is my job as a scenic designer was I was part of a team and our job was to bring a vision to life together.
Hmm.
And it's not necessarily your vision, right? A producer or director, somebody may have the vision and be like, this is what I want to do. And it is your job to collaborate and work with them to interpret that vision and bring your part to the vision as well.
Hmm.
And I love that co-creation process. So when I am I also, by the way, they said this in school, they called it art on a deadline,
Uh-huh.
which I love because if you didn't get stuff in, like the stuff wasn't getting on stage, right? So like
Sure.
it's not like,
Yeah.
oh, I can be whimsical and take my time and like do whatever I want. So that still stays with me today. I do work on deadlines for clients who have commissions. So that is definitely woven in there. That's a practical, logical part that's woven
Yeah.
in there. But the co-creation process is also woven in there. And when I am commissioned to do work, I am commissioned to do paintings for people's homes or workspaces or whatever it is. My intention is to bring their vision to life. And I always ask them to set an intention for when I create. So obviously, we're talking about what it is. Some people ask me to work off of photographs that they have. It's their favorite vacation spot. I've had people ask me to do abstract work, and they're kind of like, oh, I wanted to have it's for my spa, so I want it to be really soothing and I want it to be
Hmm.
influenced by nature. So we really, when it's abstract, we co-create together a little bit more because we're finding the thing so I can make
Sure.
my client very happy at the end and they get what
Yeah.
they want. But to me, that intention behind it is a big part of my process. And that kind of goes back to the vision of a theatrical performance. We all are familiar with Shakespeare. He's been
Yeah.
around for a long time. There's been
Yeah.
a million interpretations of Shakespeare and what time period it's set in and all of those different things, right? So there's an intention behind doing each of those. So I ask my clients, what is your intention? And what I
Hmm.
mean by that is it could be very simple as this is a really fond family memory that I cherish and I want it to live on forever. I want
Hmm.
every time I walk into that room, I want this to remind me of the memories and the joy and the love and the connection that we have.
Hmm.
It can be, I really want to feel joy in my space. It can be, I really want to feel calm in
Hmm.
my space. Okay, let's give that to you because you deserve to have
Yeah.
your environment is very important and
Sure.
we want to feel certain ways when we go into different environments.
Right.
My clients tend to lean towards that versus you can look at a piece of art and it makes you feel very frenetic, it makes you feel
Yeah.
very chaotic.
Scary flag arms. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not normally the work that people come to me for.
Yeah.
So to me it's about my background as a scenic designer has heavily influenced the way that I work.
Yeah.
It also has influenced, I have taken a combination of, I won't go into all the technical things, this will be very boring for all of you, but I have taken what I learned originally as a watercolorist and how to
Uh-huh.
prepare paper, and what I learned as a scenic designer and scenic artist of how we go super large scale.
Yeah.
And I combine those things in order to work in very oversized watercolors, which
Hmm.
there are a few watercolors doing that. I am not the only one, but it's very rare to see a 4 foot by 4 foot watercolor
Yeah.
or very large watercolors. Usually they're much smaller.
Right.
And I have been able to take those different backgrounds in order to, nobody taught me how to do that.
That's
I just
cool.
wove the processes together to be able to paint large. So, some was trial and error. I had
Sure.
to find it, but I credit both of those backgrounds as giving me the permission and the ability to work the large scale way that I work now. If I had only ever gone to watercolor classes, I would never be working large scale
Yeah.
because I wouldn't have even thought that this was possible. I might
Awesome.
have seen somebody do it on the internet because
Yeah.
occasionally like I'll come across another artist who's doing
Yeah.
really, really big painting too, but they have a different process than I have.
Mm.
So I am very grateful for that. And it's really cool that that can be how they're woven together.
So uh, I think that's interesting. And I think we see that in multiple areas of our lives. Like I was just thinking about athletes and how athletes cross train in many
Yes.
times sports that you wouldn't think to elevate their practice in their main sport. And I love that you were able to take these different pieces and create something that really isn't being done. And bringing that out is really interesting.
Yeah. And the other part of how I combine all of my backgrounds. Now this is combining my background as an artist, as a scenic designer. Some graphic design got thrown in there too, because sometimes that's what you're doing as a
Yeah.
scenic designer,
Yeah.
depending on what you're working on. And then me becoming a meditator
Hmm.
and doing other things and getting interested in other works. That is why I am able to create. I also create journals and card decks that
Yes.
I have created myself that are available because I am a lover of personal growth tools that
Yeah.
support your journey. But I also create those for clients and their businesses.
Oh.
And that again is because I take their vision and idea and I help them bring it into reality.
Hmm.
And that again, 100% comes from all of those backgrounds tied together. But I lean very heavily into when I was a scenic designer because that is what has allowed me to work in different styles for those
Hmm.
clients to actually really give them what they want.
Hmm.
Because I use those tools myself, I bring that perspective to it as not only as the designer helping them to bring it to life, but I also view it from the user's
Hmm.
perspective. And I will give suggestions of, oh, we need to add this, or it would be really great if we add this to this because it's going to help the client. Sometimes when you're close to something, you may not see it. So I help my clients weave in. So we support their clients with the end product. And it really is truly a weaving together of every single one of my backgrounds, which is really cool. And again, because of the scenic design background, I was able to go do the research to figure out how to do all of this. Initially in 2019, I was working on my first card deck with a friend of mine, and we actually received a publishing deal, which is it's a big deal.
It's a big deal. Yeah.
But we turned it down, and because just whatever, it was a choice by the terms of
Yeah.
everything. And part of the reason why we turned it down is because she was like, "You got this, right? Like you can figure out like all the printing things and everything." Because she's like, "I don't know."
Yeah.
And I was able to do that because I had so much experience as a scenic designer that was very versatile, that
Hmm.
allowed me to make that step for us. And then I now bring it to clients.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
so cool. And with scenic design, I would imagine that you are creating this with an understanding that it's non-permanent.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. It's not permanent. Yeah.
it's that, and that's so interesting when you're talking about the art that you're creating for yourself and that you're commissioning.
Mhm.
And do you feel like that non-permanence impacts the way that you approach it at all, or not?
No, I've never thought about that before because
Yeah.
really the goal is to provide an environment, though
Right.
temporary. Some of it
Yeah.
might be for a few days, some of it might be for years on end, because
Sure.
who knows. But the art, the magic is in the environment, and it's going to change, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
My goal of creating artwork, whatever form it
Hmm.
takes, is to cause a ripple effect and impact in whatever form it
Yeah.
takes. And that's a temporary one, but when you work on something really big scale, you
Yeah.
touch thousands of lives and you can bring memory and joy to so many people, or make
So
them
many.
think, or whatever it is that you're working on, because it's obviously always different. Versus, it's true, my artwork in theory, something happens to it and it gets severely damaged for some
Right.
reason, it is permanent and it will be
Yeah.
here way beyond me,
Yeah.
which is very cool.
Great.
Although now there's recordings of everything, so technically there's it is still imprinted even when things come down. But
Right.
yeah, I think that's just that's just part of the job. Just like
Yeah.
nature changes, some things are just temporary and some things last forever, and
Yeah.
that's really cool. It doesn't change the approach
The approach
for
to
me.
it.
The intention's always the same, of making the biggest impact for the viewer.
Yeah.
And well, when I'm commissioning, obviously the viewer gets say what their
Right.
their
Right.
intention is, but that's always my intention
Yeah.
behind
And
it.
do you ever get like the artist version of writer's block? Do you ever, even when you,
Oh, sure.
let's say a commission, or how do you work through that?
Yeah. So years ago, when I left the entertainment business to do something completely different,
Uh-huh.
not creative at all. I had started to get the nudges very loudly,
Mhm.
because I didn't listen at first, to go back to painting.
Mhm.
And when I finally said yes, I decided to take a beginner's watercolor class at one of the continuing ed classes, because I was like, well,
Mhm.
I haven't watercolored in quite some time, so I'm probably going to be rusty, one.
Mhm.
But really, I wanted to do it just because I wanted to be in a room full of people that wanted to create for fun
Yeah.
and for entertainment, and probably with no attachments or expectations to it.
Yeah.
And when I did that, what unfolded and happened was something very surprising. This ties into the block.
Mhm.
When I sat down to go do our first lesson, I walked in, I sat at a table, other people came in, nobody sat with me. We gathered, or it's okay, it's fine. People always do that every time I share that part. We all gather around, the teacher shows us the first lesson. These were people, some of these people in this class had never ever watercolored before. Some were like me who had experience.
Uh-huh.
And I go to sit down, and I got this very hit, this knowing of like, no, you're not doing the lesson. And I was like, what?
What?
I'm a rule follower, like I'm a nice student. I was an honor student. We
Yeah.
follow the rules. But it was a very like, no. And I was like, okay. So I was by myself, so I wasn't like causing commotion or anything. I put my headphones on,
Mhm.
and I was just playing music, like instrumental music, sort of something like that. That's what I actually love to create too.
Mhm.
And the nudge was to just paint for pure joy and
Mhm.
like not worry about the assignment, and to just play with color and have fun, and really to tap back into that original experience I had had many years before, sitting at my table in high school when I first experienced the magic of watercolor. So I did that. And for weeks on end, I would just come in and do my own thing. And the teacher didn't care. Again, I was like off by myself, and I was not causing commotion. And eventually I went, one day I just went, okay, I'm gonna go paint. It was like a fruit
Uh-huh.
vegetable thing. I was like, I'm gonna do an avocado. Probably it's not gonna be great because I haven't drawn realistically in a while. Because I let that go, it actually was amazing because I let
Mhm.
go of all of the things in the mind. And that's what I do when I am creatively blocked. I
Mhm.
use this anyway, like just as a fun creative exploration for many other things. I do guide people through these creative explorations as well, to just tap into creative flow, to let go of perfection, to just experience some relaxation, peace, joy, self-care, all of those things. But if I get that creative block, one of the things I do is I just go play with my watercolors.
Mm.
I just go have fun. I put on music. It might be just fun poppy music too. It depends on
Sure.
what I want to let go of. And I just allow the paint and everything to flow. That's one thing I do.
Mhm.
The other thing I might do, it depends on the situation,
Yeah.
is I walk away. I walk away. I might go walk, take a walk in nature, go down to the beach. I just want to reset myself.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just that walking away that gives you that perspective of you can go in with it fresh. So it does happen. I think it's just part of the process.
Yeah.
And if this doesn't happen to somebody, I would love to know your secret.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it does happen. And sometimes when I'm working on a series right now based on birch trees and being in the
Mhm.
forest, and I will do little sketches and stuff first because I'm trying to find things before I go super big.
Mhm.
So those are some of the things I do if I feel that creative block is coming up. And I also don't judge it. I think that's the most important thing. It is part of the process. We are human, and stuff comes up.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I'm terrible at what I do or anything, right?
Right.
So I don't judge it, and I may ask, like, why is this coming up? Is it because I'm supposed to go down a different path? It might just be that like I haven't settled on yet finding the thing that really makes my soul and my heart sing.
Yeah.
And it might be just that this is me wading through all the things so I can get to that thing that lights me up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting too because I can imagine, especially if you have a block, a blank canvas or blank piece of paper, whatever you're working on, is probably very intimidating. And to not judge it, maybe walk away from it, give
Mhm.
it some time and space seems really helpful. I know, and this is not the same thing whatsoever, but sometimes I'll get blocked writing an email or something for work.
Sure.
And I found that if I just do voice to text, so I don't have that, like, all I'm looking at is my signature, and I'm like, there's nothing on the screen, just finding ways around it. Like you said, don't judge it, just give it a
Mhm.
minute, and finding ways around it is so important. Are you comfortable sharing your like meditation journey?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, let's see. How can I share this? Because it's been so long and it's been so different. So I couldn't tell you how I originally experienced discovered meditation, although obviously, like now everybody knows what it is, or like they've at least heard of it. But this was probably well over a decade.
Hmm.
And I think friends introduced me to it.
Hmm.
And the best thing that I discovered was really, again, non-judgment. And what I discovered, I think this is specifically because, well, not specifically, but especially because I am a creative.
Hmm.
I'm not a one way, like one lane only kind of gal. Like
Yeah.
I'm a creative, so like I play
Yeah.
in many different lanes.
Yeah.
So I like different options for me to be available when I want to meditate. So I just started experimenting really. And I would listen to guided visual meditations. I did some experience with more that are breath focused.
Hmm.
That one was really hard for me. It
Mm.
took me a really, really, really long time, years to be able to get the breath meditations. Makes sense because I'm very visual. So I
Yes.
have guided visual ones.
Yeah.
I also started to realize as I got more comfortable being guided by other people, whether it was in person or I was listening to something that
Hmm.
I had downloaded. When I got more comfortable with that, I started to be able to go outside of that a
Hmm.
little bit. So then I started to discover that, well, just being in nature is a meditation. You sit quietly. And by the way, for those of you, if you've never meditated before, it's not about like the thoughts all go away
Right. Yeah.
because we live in the world and like there's
Yes.
the world around us. It is more about like getting more aware. And sometimes those thoughts, for me at least, bring in an awareness of something I might want to shift.
Hmm.
Sometimes I get lots of ideas when I get quiet and meditate, right? And like ideas will start to drop in and bombard me in the best way possible.
Yeah.
I also find that listening to music is a form of meditation. And then very quickly, my watercoloring and my creative expression became, it actually is my number one form, my highest form of
Yeah.
meditation that works best for me. And my point is, it was a journey for me, and it really was of trial and error and experimenting with different things that worked. Some
Hmm.
people love to use a mantra. I'm not really a
Hmm.
mantra person, but that is another way to meditate. It would be if somebody was looking to do this, I would say experiment and see what works best for you. And by the way, you may need to do something a couple times to actually see, or a few times if you actually gravitate towards it.
Yes.
It is called a practice for a reason.
I love that. Yeah.
And then I discovered later on, this was a few years ago, probably more than 5 years ago now, I started creating my own meditations. I would write and record my own meditations that I would share with people.
Yeah.
Actually, the two collections that I'm working on right now that are going to be in a solo show actually have poetry and meditations that go along with them.
Wow.
That was not really the plan. It's just what happened. They just
Yeah.
started coming in. And I was like, this would actually be really cool to be able to have people have this experience if they choose to have this experience. I hope I answered that question well enough
Yeah.
because it
Absolutely.
really is a journey and an evolution. And I'm still like on that journey and discovering new tools, new techniques, and some work better than others. And it might be that one day I need this
Yes.
And the next day I
Yeah.
need this one.
Yeah. It's interesting. I am on a meditative journey as well, and I don't think there's one size fits all
No.
for anybody, much less yourself. And there were, and when I'm doing it by myself, max I can meditate for is about 10 minutes. When
Hmm.
I'm doing it with others or in a yoga practice in particular, I mean, I can go for a long time. But I to what you said about not judging yourself when you have a
Hmm.
blockage, for a while I was like, why can't I do more than like 10 minutes? Like, why is this
Hmm.
a problem? And I heard a practitioner say, think about it like you're creating dinner.
Hmm.
And in order to create dinner and a delicious dinner that's going to nourish you, what do we have to do first? And I was like, get the food. And he's like, yeah. And come up with a recipe, yeah. And he was like, but you have to clean the dishes. You have to
Yeah.
start with clean dishes. And I was like, oh my God. He was like, that's what it's doing for you. That 10 minutes is cleaning your brain for the
Hmm.
day. And then it's amazing how your viewpoint can change so much. And I love that what you said about there really isn't one size fits all. And sometimes it's not about shutting off the thoughts. Sometimes it's about letting the thoughts in.
Yeah.
So that's really beautiful. And I can only imagine how it impacts the work that you do. Is
Yeah.
there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to highlight?
Well, what you just said there, I'll just elaborate on
Sure.
is that it does impact my work.
Yeah.
And my intention is that when people view my work, you've seen some of my work,
Yeah.
assuming you probably realize it's more on the calming side, is my intention is that that can be a meditation for somebody where they can then go, oh, I can experience with all of my senses or some of my senses, and I can be drawn to what I'm seeing, what I'm even like, even though you may not touch the painting, like you can still feel that there's texture in
Yes.
there. And I think that is, I consider my art to be meditative art or energy art, whatever somebody
Hmm.
wants to call it, because I am in a very meditative state when I am creating.
Hmm.
So I hope that people get to experience that too. And that's just another way you can experience meditation. And one of the things I love too about when I personally create meditations, or I've noticed it even in the poems that I've been writing for these
Hmm.
collections, I'm always tapping into as many of the senses as I possibly can.
Hmm.
And I think that's because we all learn differently. Some people are very visual. Like some
Yeah.
people do not like guided visual meditation because
Right.
they're not visual people,
Right.
whereas they're more feeling. So like the breath work stuff might work better for them, or they're very auditory. So I try to weave in all of the different senses when I'm creating a meditation for people to listen to,
Yeah.
as well as the poetry. I'm trying to tap into all of those senses. And I really hope that people can experience that too through my artwork, even though technically it is visual, is the
Right.
first thing that you're going to experience. But if you're willing to spend some time in front of it, like,
Yeah.
do you notice a shift in your body? Like, do you notice you're taking a deeper breath? Are you pausing for a moment? Are you indulging? Are you starting to imagine walking along the shoreline
Hmm.
or walking through the forest and maybe touching the bark of a tree and noticing the crunch beneath your feet? That's the experience that
Yeah.
I intend and wish for people to have when they experience
That's very
that.
cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's really, really neat. So, what advice would you give to your younger self, knowing what you know now?
Oh gosh. Whew. So much.
Yeah.
I'd probably tell her that we were going to be an artist when we got older.
Yeah.
And she'd be like, what? And I hope that me giving her that advice would make her have more confidence and
Mm.
might have cut out a few years of the extra wandering around the
Yeah.
path to get to
Yeah.
the path I'm on now. But I would tell her that we are all unique
Hmm.
and we are all different, and it is okay to perceive the world the way that you perceive it, and
Hmm.
the experiences that you have and the way that you experience them are perfectly perfect for us. And it's okay that it's different for someone else. And it's okay if we don't always agree with some of the rules and the structures, even though we followed them.
Yes.
When we're older, we get to break the rules when we paint and create and do all of those things. And it becomes a very fun, amazing, she didn't know what meditation was back then, but
Yeah.
it becomes a very amazing process that like the way that I create now reminds me of, even though it was 25-ish years ago, I can still tap back right into that moment of experiencing that first watercolor on the page.
Mm.
And if I could say to her, "Ooh, we get to tap into that feeling like anytime we want when we're creating, we know how to do it. We get to tap into that feeling too when we're just living our life and running our business." I think she would be like, "What?
So
What do we
cool.
get to do? That'd be so fun."
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And you've alluded to this a bit, but what do you enjoy most about the work that you do?
Oh, it's interesting. So for me, it's all about the process.
Hmm.
And I've had people over the years ask me, but like, how do you give up your work that you created? Because there's some artists who do it and they don't want to sell or anything.
Yeah.
This is so interesting. I do not have attachment to the work that I do unless I very specifically am creating something for me for a
Hmm.
specific purpose. And I think that's it for me. I love creating. I love watching people get to experience my work. I love hearing their interpretations of my work. I sometimes will post something, not share any of the intentions or the inspiration, will ask people questions. And what I receive back is magical because people are tapping into their own experiences, their own memories of childhood. I have gotten the most delicious answers. And to me, that's where it also becomes a co-creation. I,
Hmm.
I love that. So I love that co-creation process. And for me, it really is the process. I get to be in a meditative state. I get to be in creative flow when I am pouring my heart and soul out onto the page and truly getting to do what I absolutely love.
Yeah. That's wonderful. And how can people find you and find your work and commission you and buy journals and cards and all of the above?
Yeah. So everything is on my website, which I'm sure Megan will drop because no one spells
Yes.
my last name correctly, which is jencolombo.com. But you'll find everything on there. Some of
Hmm.
the large new collections are not up on the website yet, but honestly, if you're on Instagram, that's the best place to follow me because that's
Okay.
always where I'm posting my walks at the beach. It's where I post some like mindful moments to breathe with my artwork and some ways to do that. It's where I post the poetry. It's where I post behind the scenes. It's always where somebody will get the first sneak peek at like new
Yeah.
pieces that will be available. So Jen Faye Art, which I'm sure Megan will drop for you there
Yes.
too.
I'll
It,
have it
it
in the
winds up on Facebook too, but Instagram
yeah.
I live for the reels because they're so fun and easy for me to create.
Yes.
So that's the best place to like hang out with
Hang
me.
out. Awesome.
Yeah.
And we'll have that in the show notes and all that kind of good stuff. And this has just been such a pleasure. Thank you so. Oh, and if someone wants to come see your work in person,
Mhm.
where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm in Norwalk, Connecticut, and I have a
Hmm.
studio out of my house. So if somebody wanted to do a
Okay.
studio visit, they can. But I will have work showing in May at a co-working space right near me in Westport, Connecticut. But I'm also always available if somebody needed like a virtual tour because they don't
Hmm.
live near me.
Yeah.
Anything is possible. We can hop on Zoom and we could do a virtual tour.
Yeah.
Uh, or I could send people images even if they haven't made it to the
Sure.
website yet,
Sure.
which happens because it
Yeah.
usually takes me a while to update there. All of that is possible.
That's great. Jen, this was awesome. I feel like I could keep talking to you for hours. I
Thank you.
have really enjoyed our conversation. I enjoy your work and I look forward to continuing to enjoy it.
Thank you so much. I had a blast and I'm really curious to know what the listeners have to say and like curious
Yeah.
like are you going to go experience a museum in a different way? Or are you going to go just experience a local gallery in a different way after this conversation? Or
Yeah.
something you even see on Instagram? Because we're all of us artists are on Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to experience, I can tell you right now with 100% certainty, I will experience the grocery store differently.
Oh, I love that. I love that you asked that question.
Yeah, I'm absolutely. That was such a great example. So thank you so much.
Thank you.